Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, the ups and downs and how to navigate life with kids on your own while keeping sane. Covering subjects such as domestic violence through to fussy eaters and solo dating. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome.
Hi everyone. This week I have a really good friend of mine who I've known for the last, dare I say it, 25 odd years. Lindsay McGinley has been a single mum on and off for 20 plus years of 3 wonderful girls. Previously, I had worked with Lindsay in the insurance industry as a contact centre rep and then in many other project management roles. However, the universe had different plans for both of us. With me moving to London and then to Australia and her marrying an army guy and moving to Germany and having her youngest daughter, Sophie. Lindsay is now an artist and has moved back to the UK. And tragically, 18 months ago, she and the girls lost their darling husband and father to a heart attack. And once again, Lindsay is not only dealing with being a widow, but also a single mum again. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, you. How are you doing?
Hi. So, wow, it's been a roller coaster journey, and I've been around for part of it, but I've been here in Australia now for 13 years, but we still stay in contact. So, hey, look, where do we start? Oh, dog's barking in the background. It's all good. These things happen. Where do we start? Shall we start at the beginning? Do you want to tell us how you've got to where you've got to? This could be a massive long story. So let's start with Molly. Okay, so Molly is your eldest. Yeah. And so, right, let's start with you were a single mum with Molly, weren't you?
I was told at 15 I'd never have children because of medical reasons. So it was a bit of a shock when at the age of 18 I found myself pregnant. I didn't know I was pregnant. I didn't know for a long time. In fact, I didn't find out I was officially pregnant till I was gone 5 months with her. She was high away, and the doctors had done tests which had come back negative. And then I was really poorly one night and sent up to the hospital, and they scanned me, and woohoo, there she was. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. Her dad was due to fly off to America for 3 years to go to uni. So I knew that I was going to be on my own pretty much, with the support of my mum, which was a bit of a scary thing to have to tell her at that age. But yeah, so she was born 5 weeks early on the 12th of June, 1993, and came out looking a bit like a toilet brush with her hair. It was just stuck up on end. She was a fucking thing. And I was like, oh my God, I have to look after this now. What do I do?
She's going to love you for that comment, but yeah.
I call her all the time still. She's now 28. So, it's been a bit of a journey from then. So then did her dad fly off to America and then spend the 3 years doing the uni thing? Right. So she was not quite 3 months old when he flew out to Atlanta. And he got soccer, get my teeth in. He had a soccer scholarship to uni there. There is a really weird twist. I don't know whether you want to know about that. He was accepted in 3 universities in America. One in San Antonio in Texas. Can't remember where the second one was, and then this place in Atlanta. And he really struggled to make his mind up to which one he wanted to go to, because the San Antonio one looked really good, but the Atlanta one gave him more freedom. So he decided to go to Atlanta. Little did I know, 15 years later, I would end up marrying my husband, whose brother is the soccer coach for Trinity Tigers in San Antonio. So had he decided to go over to that one, then my future brother-in-law would have been his coach.
Wow, that's bizarre.
So bit of a weird twist, but no, he decided to go to Atlanta. And communication in those days, before mobile phones and things like that really were a thing, and there was no internet, it was tough. So it was letter writing and things like that. And after a few months, the letter writing got less and less on his side, and I just didn't hear from him anymore. I get the odd thing. I didn't really have a huge amount of contact with his parents, although his sister was really supportive and good. So she was around a lot. So for that first sort of year, I was pretty much on my own with Molly. He was in another country, and we never lived together. He came back after a year because complications with his funding. And we sort of had a bit of a on-off relationship to see what was going on. I was really determined, because having been left as a child when my own father died when I was 10, I was really adamant that my children, or my child, was going to have a father figure in her life until she was old enough to make it herself. So I insisted on seeing him, insisted on her going to him at least every other weekend, which was good. It was fun. I could plan things. I could go out. I could have fun when he had her and things like that. But there was always the times when she was a very sickly child, and she had horrendous asthma from a very early age after contracting bronchiolitis when she was about 6 months old. And every time she went to his and she coughed or wheezed or something like that, he'd panic, phone me and say, I need to bring her home. I need to bring her home. And I was like, well, you can't bring her home because I'm not at home. I'm out. I'm staying with friends, or I'm out for a meal, or I'm having, I was a 19. And I still had a life away from being a mum, and I needed that break. So it really was a bit of a challenge in that sense to juggle everything, to make sure that I was there for her if she was ill, or I had to change my plans at the last minute because he couldn't cope with it, or, he's never been a full-time dad. So he didn't understand the responsibility. He was the one who could go off and do what he wanted, and I was one literally sitting at home holding the baby.
And you had your mum. Were you living at your mother's then, or were you living somewhere else?
When I fell pregnant, I was living in a basement sort of studio flat, which belonged to my best friend's parents. So I'd been living there when I found out I was pregnant. And then as soon as I found out, I was aware that in Norwich, which is where I was at the time, there was an organisation called Umbrella Housing, which was for single parents, and they provided you with a flat, which was so cheap. And from there, then you were put as a priority to get a council house in the UK. Yeah. So when Molly was about 18 months old, I was lucky enough to get a brand new built house. They built a new estate, and they cleared the waiting list. And it was a strange setup, because you had all the people at the top of the list. So you had like all the old age pensioners that wanted moving. You had all the single parents, and then you just had everything in between. So it was a very strange sort of environment, but there were a lot of children around, so they always had someone to play with. Everyone, it was like a little cul-de-sac I lived, and so everyone kept an eye out for the kids. So it was quite a nice little. And we all looked after each other. We babysat for each other. So life got a bit better on the fact that I still had quite a lot of freedom, and I could still have fun. And we got to the point in the summer where we'd all just come outside at 7 o'clock at night with a drink or whatever, and we'd all sit on our driveways and have a social life. And we had really good time.
And that's the thing. I think nowadays, that's changed. I mean, I'm very lucky. I live in an awesome neighbourhood. I know most of my neighbours, but I know other parents who feel really isolated because in 20 odd years on, we don't socialise like that. We don't we don't sit in our streets or go to each other, and especially during COVID. COVID's been horrendous.
Definitely. The difference between the environment I lived in then and the environment I live in now is a bit strange, because actually, to look at it, it's quite a similar setup to where I used to live when Molly was a baby. However, there is no socialising at all. So I know who my neighbours are. I say hello to them, apart from the crazy lady. We don't talk to her. But we all know, we're all sort of pleasant, but there's no community spirit really. So it's really much lonelier. And obviously, having been married to John for 16 years and doing everything together, to then not have him here is taken, a lot of getting used to. I don't know whether I am used to it. It was actually 21 months yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is it 21 months now?
Goes
Blimey,
so fast. But it's a different, dynamic, because the girls are that much older. Sophie's now 15. She's 16 in 2 weeks. And it's very different from having toddlers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, going back to that time when I lived there, Molly's dad and I went our separate ways pretty much because it just wasn't working. He found somebody else and they moved in together and things. And it took me a while to get my head around that, because I wanted more than anything for my daughter to grow up in a stable family environment, which she had.
Yeah.
And then I met the local rogue and that all changed things a bit crazy. And we ended up getting married. I'm not quite sure how that happened, if I'm honest with you, but it did. And then Amy came along. And it was going from being a part-time family with Molly's dad to a full-on 2.4 with children. We moved house to another neighbourhood down the road from the school that Molly was attending at the time, because Molly by this point was about 4 or 5. There's about a 4-year age gap between the two of them. And Amy was a very easy child, to be honest, which was good because I was really busy then. By this time, I was working with you.
That's how we met. Was how we met with you. You had Amy and Molly.
Amy was about 18 when
Crazy,
I joined Norwich Union. I'd been working at previously. And my then husband was a house husband, or so he said. But then the affairs started and everything else. And he was not a very, what's the word? I'm trying to think politely here. He was not attentive in any way. Opposite.
Or present with the girls from, and I was over your house quite a bit during that time. He think that the children were my responsibility. You know as well as I do, we work hours sometimes, and we drink after work. Well, I'm sure of which he used to walk in and tell me to get out, and he wasn't an unpaid baby and all this sort of stuff. And the marriage failed quite drastically, mainly due to him having an affair with my best friend at the time, my neighbour. And I kicked him out, but it was hard and he wouldn't leave. It took me 4 years to get a divorce. And all through that time, he stayed at the house. And in fact, I think it was you I rang the day he left. He literally just walked out one day and went, "I'm done." And through and I think I rang you and you went, "He's gone." And he came round with a glass, with a bottle of wine, and it was great. And from that day onwards, I have never looked back. Oh dear, I'm such a bad influence.
And
I know. And then
a single mum.
And so after husband number 2, then you met.
No, husband number 1.
Sounds really bad, doesn't it? But husband number 3.
No.
Oh, husband number 1. That's right, because you never got married to Molly's dad. That's right. And then you met John,
which was mad, absolutely. I was
It was a bit
I
crazy.
was on the rebound completely. And I met him through a mutual friend of ours, brother. It's a bit of a messy situation.
Yeah, we won't talk about that.
He was at the time in Bosnia serving with the army.
Wow.
We talked and talked. And then he flew back to Germany, which is where he was based. And we talked and talked and talked. And then we just went, I think we should meet each other and see what happens. And my ex-husband had left the property on the 7th of October. And on the 19th of December that year, I met John in Amsterdam. Craziest end of my entire life. Felt completely and utterly head over heels in love. I now know properly for the first time. And we had 16 years, nearly 17 years together. And that was a strange sort of period because obviously he was in the army, so he went away a lot. So I was
Well, that was what I was going to say. You were a single mum on and off, like while he was away on tours. And how long would a tour last?
The actual tour itself would usually be 6 months or between 6 and 7 months. And in that 6-7 months, they come home for 2 weeks at some point, which they call R&R for rest and.
Yeah.
But you can never really get back into it because as soon as they leave, it takes you about 2-3 weeks to get into a routine again. Because everything changes. Then you've got to get the children. You know, Sophie was a toddler. The girls were older. They really missed him. Sophie didn't understand. So it was always quite a really tough time, those first few weeks. And then you just get into the swing of it and they'd come home on R&R and throw everything out again. And then off they go. But usually before a tour of that scale, you know, Afghanistan or Bosnia or Iraq or whatever, there was so much training they had to do. So all in all, by the time the training starts, they come home, they decompress, they fly to Cyprus after they've been on tour to decompress for a few days. It kind of is nearly a year of your life.
It's scary, isn't it? I mean, I didn't have I had an ex-boyfriend. I had a boyfriend who was a mercenary in Iraq, so he would be away 3 months and then he'd be back like for a couple of weeks and then he'd be away for 3 months. Sometimes that would turn into 6 months. But I didn't have kids, so the challenges that you've had with children and them not really understanding and like it is like it's like a grieving as such because they come into your life, they mess it up, and then they bugger off again. And it's like that detachment
said,
and getting it all back on track.
The only preparation I had for being a widow because I like when he's not there, but I always knew he was coming back. I mean, the first time he went away when Sophie was born, he went to Canada on exercise for 5 months. And there was barely any communication because they were out on the prairie and there's no phone lines or anything like that. So you couldn't speak. I maybe spoke to him 4 or 5 times in those 5 months. And when he returned, Sophie wouldn't even look at him, didn't want to speak to him, didn't want to look at him. She hated him because obviously she thinks, oh, well, you know, Dad left me and now he's come back and expects me to be this. And it is a difficult challenge having that kind of life of the single mum and not single mum. And it's very difficult. It was very difficult for him to come back into the family, having seen how much he'd grown, because at that age, you know, children change so much. All her likes and dislikes had changed. You know, she'd grown another foot. She got out of nappies. She had her own character coming through. And he'd missed so much. You know, he missed her first steps. He missed her first birthday. All this sort of stuff, you know, that you would as a single parent deal with. But then you've got the extra pressure of them being in a war zone or a dangerous place or something like that. On top of that, you know, when the children, as they do, play up, you know, Molly and Amy are fighting over something ridiculous, like she's got more sweets in her pot than or I want to hair and she won't let me have the hairbrush and all the little bickery things, especially with girls that And also that.
And you have 3 girls, so
that
yeah.
wonderful period where they discover your makeup bag and all your really nice lipstick that you've kept really pristine are then all over the walls and all over everything else, all over their faces,
Oh my God.
And the discipline.
Yeah, losing your mind.
I've always really been the disciplinarian in all of their lives because I'm the only constant. I'm the only constant the 3 of them have had, apart from my parents or my mum. But though I am the only one that they've ever been, there they can rely on because I'm always there. So that's always, as a single parent and in the situation I've lived in, that's always probably the biggest challenge is being that one person that they rely on for absolutely everything. They need you to clean their tears away. They need you to clean their backside, as we know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Sorry, I've just to explain to everyone, while I was chatting to Lindsay previously, before we started the interview, my son was yelling at me from the toilet, "Wipe my bottom, mummy." So we were laughing about that because, God love him. He can wipe his own bum, by the way. But, he's obviously just needs his mum to do it for some godforsaken reason.
Because when they want mum to do it, then mum has to do it because there's no one else there.
Well, and I'm sure in like 10 years' time, I'm going to be going, I miss when I had to wipe his bum.
Really don't do that.
No, I'm sure I won't. There'll be other things I miss, but definitely not that.
Making sure he's behaving himself around girls or he's not going to get himself in trouble.
Oh, my God.
But no, the other...
Well, he's already got a girlfriend, so don't go there.
Lucky Oscar.
Yeah, I know. He's not even 6. So I'm like, whatever.
Oh, no. But no,
I'm like, no kissing.
Yeah, it's a very lonely thing being a single parent at times, even when you're surrounded by.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, that was what I was going to say. Like, it was great with Molly because, like, you had that network, I suppose. And did you find that you got that when you were on your own a little bit regarding army life when you were because I'm like, I've been there where I've sort of been an army wife, sort of not because he wasn't in the army, but he was doing army stuff. But I wasn't in a barracks, or I wasn't staying in army accommodation. I was staying in a normal house surrounded by other people who didn't even have a clue what was going on. But I didn't have kids at that time. So I could go out and do whatever I want when he was off doing a tour. But like with you, with kids, like, did you find that the army supported you and you had a network, or because time had moved on from 20 odd years ago,
it was very,
you just didn't have
it's
that?
very different. And I think you'll understand this as well because of the situation you're in. I was in another country, and whether that's drive, a 15-hour drive, or a 24-hour flight, 26-hour flight, family is family, and you miss them so much. And, when I had Molly, my mum was on hand. My mum was there if I needed something, and she was there to help me. If Molly was ill and been awake for 3 days in a row because she kept me awake and I couldn't sleep, my mum would take over for a night and let me have a rest. Well, there was none of that when you're in another and your family are
another country. No.
So that's.
And you can't also, with friends and stuff, you can't also, like, they're not like family. So, like, with because you've got that relationship with your mum, your dad, your brother, your sisters, whatever, you've got a relationship with them and it's family. So you can feel as though you can ask them, hey, can you look after him for a night because I'm knackered? But with friends and neighbours, I don't feel as though
the army life abroad is very different to the army life in the UK. So we're all in the same boat. We're all out in a foreign country. None of us have family there. Family will come out and visit from time to time, but they're only there for a week at most, really. Some other people who had I mean, I can think of one in particular. A good friend of mine, Carol, was her daughter was in the army and married to a soldier as well. And when she had her first child, her mum, who was single, moved over and lived with them as like a living nanny kind of thing. So that you had that there. But for me and a lot of us, you stick together. So although they're not family by blood, the army family itself are probably the most people I've ever come across in my life. And I've met so many amazing women who are so strong, who, and you know, in the face of adversity and everything, you know, I've seen friends and colleagues of John's I haven't seen them being killed. He's been killed, and
no, but they've been killed, and then you've had to deal with
then you have to watch from the sidelines how that family pick themselves back up again. And the army, although they do look after you, it's a very strict system where after 9 months you're out of that house. That's it. So help you find anywhere.
Wow.
So you have to move.
But 9 months is not, and like you've been going through the bereavement of losing John, right? So it's like you said, it's been like 21 months, 22 months since you've lost him. But like I've seen you through that period of time, obviously from a distance because I'm in Australia. But like we've chatted and spoken, and like 9 months is no time at all. You're only just sort of getting used to the idea at 9 months.
To it because it was a big shock. It was such a shock because there was no signs of it happening. You know, it just turned everything upside down. And people always say when someone dies, oh, you know, it gets better with time. That's just not true. It doesn't get better with time. You get used to working around that void. That void never goes. It is always going to be a huge hole shaped like John's shaped hole within me. It's, you know, when he died, a part of me died with him. And so navigating through that, and also having, you know, it, unless you've been through your partner, your life partner, soul, ever died, it really cannot be understood by other people. People think that they get it because mum or their dad or their brother or their sister or something, but it's unique. It's very, very difficult because I thought he'd be there to see Sophie go to her prom, you know, and everything else. And it feels like it's
get married, all of those sort of things.
I know from growing up with my mum being a single mum, after my died for a few years, she was on her own before she remarried. It's just so difficult dealing with your own grief, but then having to be that strong person, because I at the time had a 13-year-old child who needed me more than she'd ever needed me before, and I need John, and John's not there. No matter which way you look at it and which way you try and mess it up, no one can come in and fill that gap and make you feel better. And you know,
no, and then there's all the things that you have to deal with as well on top of that. So, and I don't mean like funeral and stuff like that, because everyone seems to crowd round and support you sort of in the first few months. But it's like when you go 6 months, 7 months, 8 months down the line, and you're then having to deal with clearing out wardrobes and all the other stuff, right? And so tell me to stop because I don't want to upset you because I know it's still raw. But like all of those sort of things, 9 times out of 10, you're like, people have gone because they go, oh, you're all right now. You know, it's been 6 months or whatever. And, you know, it doesn't work that way.
Who was actually with me the night he died, she came over. I phoned her at some ridiculous time in the morning and she just drove in a dressing gown and just came straight away. So she was with me when they came and told me that they couldn't do anything else. And 6 months later, she said, come on, it's time to pull yourself together now. It's been 6 months, you know, you need to get a grip. And I was like, sorry. And it really upset me. And friends, because I got past that, because I thought, well, if she thinks going back to the person I was 6 months ago, that's never going to happen. I'm a different person now. And maybe I've outgrown her, And I found that with a lot of people, because we have obviously had friends as couples and things like that. And when or something happens, it's not comfortable. It's even uncomfortable going to a family get together, because I'm now the only person. There's me and my mother. You know, my passed away 4 years ago. So we had, and then John, 2 years later. And Mum hadn't got her head round my stepfather dying. And I was so worried about her afterwards, thinking she's never going to be happy again. She's just this, that, and the other. Now I totally understand it. And it's not that you'll never be happy again. It's just a totally different life. Everything's different.
Yeah.
You see things through different eyes. I look at my children differently. And the way that they've dealt with what they've dealt with has been remarkable. But Sophie, bless her, the youngest of them, and obviously his biological child, she did really well until recently. And now it's starting to come out, which I expected, but it's incredibly hard on my own, because she's very good when it comes to giving attitude. And
well, and also she's going to be 16 soon. So the thing is, it's like hormones, all of that stuff.
When everything needs to be running smoothly, and any little fly in an ointment is going to upset the balance of a teenager. But nothing will upset the balance more than, the dad that she adored and did all this stuff dying, because he used to be very sporty. So he was really into sport. So he used to take her running. They used to go to the athletics track together. They used to go on, the big inflatable things on lakes and things like that. He used to take it all.
Yeah.
Bike ride. And
look, and he wasn't like an old geezer either. Like, I mean, he was going out the weekend prior to his 49th birthday, wasn't it?
48. He was 40.
48th birthday. Oh my God, 48th. That's right. So prior to his 48th birthday, because him and me are about the same age. Prior to his 48th birthday, and so like he was 48, man. That's like no age at all, really. And as a child, you would expect your parents to last until they're 70 or 80. And like she's had to deal with her dad going at such a young age, It's and I suppose when your number's up, and none of us know when our time is, but yeah, that's a hell of a thing to deal with for you and her and the other girls.
And I think you just hit the nail on the head about the whole, they expect them to be around forever. It has changed the way I am as a person and the mother I am, because now, kids come up and they're like, I want this, I want that, I want this, we need to do this, we need to do that. And you're always like wrapped up in your own head, and it's like, yeah, we'll do it in a minute, we'll do it in a minute. I don't do that anymore. If children want something and it's within grasp, or it's something that's a reasonable request, I will drop everything and I will do it with them, because I might never get that time again. They may never get that time, and it makes the things we do together that much more important. And I'm very much, and it was strange because John died in December. He died on December the 14th. His birthday was the 17th of December. And then obviously you have Christmas. So between us, we'd been building up the Christmas presents for people and everything else. And I don't know why I decided that year, but I did. And I said, instead of buying, meaningless gifts for people that just go, oh, yes, that's lovely, and put it away, let's make a point this year of giving gifts that create memories. So we bought for the three girls tickets to go and see Billie Eilish at the O2. So three of them could all go together, because at this point I had Sophie at home, Molly was living in London, and Amy was living in Liverpool and still is. And so they didn't get to spend that much time together as sisters. So we well, let's do that. Molly was living in London, so they could all stay at Molly's. I can take them down. They can have a couple of days for themselves, go to the concert, make a memory that they'll be able to have in their mind for the rest of their lives. And I was very doing things like this, like and experiences instead of meaningless presents.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I'd seen what was coming, because now the memories that we hold are all we've got. And we've sort of said, we need to make more of these. Just because he's gone doesn't mean we've gone, and we need to do what he'd want us to do, and we need to live every minute for the best possible version of ourselves we can. And and I really do see that the girls have embraced that. It's very difficult for them, and it's obviously with COVID happening straight afterwards, because he died in the December, and then the UK COVID went mental in about the end of February, beginning of March.
A couple of months, wasn't it? January, February, yeah.
And then my mum contracted COVID, and I was really scared that I was going to lose her.
Yeah.
At the time when I really needed that support network around me, I couldn't have it because we were in isolation.
No, because you couldn't. Yeah, exactly. So you had COVID. Your mum had contracted it, so you couldn't see her because she was isolating and stuff. And you were obviously in a different town in the UK, but like you had to isolate because you're one of the people who potentially could be vulnerable if you get COVID, and so you had to be careful as well about going out and venturing out and partying and stuff
for months. And on top of all that, I had Amy in Liverpool, which is 5
hours. Which is a cesspit.
Lovely. It's
not literally like Liverpool's lovely, but like for COVID, it was horrendous.
Luckily, she never got it, or she did. She was asymptomatic.
Yeah.
But she was on furlough, so for the first time, her and her partner were stuck in a small flat together. So I was having her on the phone every day, going, "He's driving me mad," and deal with that. And the other things, Molly's in a relationship now. And even Sophie has a boyfriend. So when I'm in my own house, I'm sometimes surrounded by couples, and I'm not in. And that's quite a tough cookie to bite, because some days I'm absolutely fine. Other days I still miss him so much. And, and there's silly things like yesterday, you don't know this, this lovely lady decided that she would put her foot on the accelerator and not the brake and hit my car up the side, and it does shock you. And all I wanted to do was ring him and tell him. And
because it's like just to say, hey, this bloody stupid woman, and can you help me or whatever? And you can't.
To bang ideas around. If children are playing up, you can discuss it with them and say, how are we going to deal with this? What's your ideas on? Come up with a plan. But when you're on your own, you have to do all of that. You have to do absolutely. And amongst all that, you have to cook, clean, put a roof over their head, buy them clothes, do this, run them around. Like be mums.
Deal with hormones.
And having all the girls, you can imagine hormones is beautiful.
And once a month, I'm imagining everyone sinks in and it's all fun and like PMT towers.
It's so terrible. And I had a hysterectomy at 32, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So it hurt me even more, because they angsty, and I'm like, oh, here we go. I just hide.
So it's pretty like I completely understand, and I say I completely understand, but I don't, because I haven't been through it. And I know that because I haven't been through it, I can't dive into where you're at. But how do you overcome those shitty days where you're just like, and I think I know what you're going to answer here, but where you're just like, I don't know how I'm going to get through today.
When we were in lockdown and everything else, and even though I probably wasn't meant, I know I wasn't meant to do it, I'd jump in my car and I would go for a drive with loud music on, sing myself stupid, cry myself stupid, beat myself up, be angry at the world, shout and scream in the middle of nowhere, calm myself down, get back in the car, drive home, and I could calm down. That was when it, you know, I really needed the escape. And then I've always been into sort of arts and crafts and things like that. For many years, I've done that. But I threw myself into journaling, art journaling. And all the way through lockdown, I did at least one journal page a day, used acrylics or whatever, made an absolute.
So what is art journaling, though? Just for people who don't know, what is art journaling?
All it really is playing with art mediums in a book. That's the basic thing. So I would just layer upon layer upon layer of different paints, inks, pastes, whatever, until I got to a point where I could feel myself calm. So it was my kind of therapy. Sit there and I'd have a blank page, and the first thing I did was destroy that blank page. Could have been doing anything. I could have thrown paint at it. I could have drawn on it. I could have scribbled on it. I could have stamped on it. And that's the start of it. And then, you know, I could sit there for a day and just do one page, but it got a lot. You don't think about anything else. It clears your mind. So you're just concentrating on the there and now. It's a bit like mindfulness in that sense, is that, you know, I practice mindfulness a lot, and that has helped me through. I also had positive hypnotherapy. A good friend of mine who's also an artist had been training to be a hypnotherapist, and she'd asked me the November before John died if I'd be interested in doing it. And I said, yeah, definitely. And then obviously John died and she didn't want to bother me. And I actually went to her and said, would you still like me to volunteer to do this? Because I actually think it would be quite good for me. So she taught me a lot of techniques and gave me some audios to listen to, and which put you in sort of a state of trance. And the power that came through that was phenomenal. The feeling of calm gave me was absolutely amazing. And she was gobsmacked by how well I was in tune with it all and how much difference it was making. So I was, and we were able to do it on Zoom during lockdown. So it was my one thing.
Wow.
It was a one thing a week that I looked forward to, and I knew that if I had a bad day or whatever, it'd be okay because I was going to have my appointment, and I knew that I'd feel better then. So I always had that as a crutch to sort of keep me going. I didn't do it. There was no talking therapy.
Thanks everyone for listening to part one of the interview I did with my good mate Lindsay regarding her bereavement and dealing with the death of her husband. Part two will be coming up next week, so please tune in and listen to part two of my interview with Lindsay next week.